John 8 today. We're going to come back to John 8 at the end of this series and to almost the last thing that's said in this chapter, but today we're looking earlier on in chapter 8 and particularly verse 12. I want you to imagine that you are a theater major. I know that's not hard for some of you. And tonight you're attending a Hitchcock festival. And you're doing that as part of a class on film theory. So you've heard about Hitchcock your whole life, but you don't want your professor to know this. You've never actually watched a Hitchcock film. Well, tonight, your class is going to be there from 4 o'clock until midnight with just short breaks because you're going to be watching Rope, The Man Who Knew Too Much, Rear Window, and then Vertigo. Well, somewhere around 7 o'clock, you doze off. And when you wake up, you don't know if you've slept for 3 minutes or if you've slept for 3 hours. Before you fell asleep, you were watching James Stewart on a bus in Morocco with Doris Day. When you woke up, you're watching James Stewart with Grace Kelly in an apartment, and James Stewart has his leg in a cast and he's sitting in a wheelchair. So is this the same story? We might wonder the same thing about the Bible. So the Old Testament seems to be the story of Abraham and his descendants. But the New Testament seems to be all about Jesus. Is it the same story, Old Testament and New? It is. And it is all about Jesus. And it's always been about Jesus. Well, if that's the case, why not just skip the Old Testament and read the New Testament? Well, there's a lot of reasons why not. I'm going to give you one, because the New Testament authors drew on the Old Testament in order to tell Jesus' story. And Jesus did the same thing. So in John chapters 6, 7, and 8, Jesus uses stories from Israel's time in the wilderness to introduce himself. So in chapter 6, he turns to the manna from heaven story. We looked at that last week. That's found in Exodus 16. In chapter 7, he uses Exodus 17, the story of water from the rock, to illustrate how he can restore and save people. In chapter 8, he reveals his identity and what he can do through Numbers chapter 9, the story of the pillar of fire that guided Israel through the wilderness. Now, we're going to look at that in John chapter 8 in just a moment. Before we do, there's a textual matter to kind of get out of the way. I'm sure that some of you, as you've read the Gospel of John, have wondered about this. So back in John chapter 7, verse 2, John says explicitly that the events that are taking place happened at the Feast of Tabernacles, which was also called the Feast of Booths. Tabernacles was a week-long festival, one of 3 that every Jewish man living in Israel was expected to attend. It was a week-long, but it wasn't just the men. Their whole families came for Tabernacles, and it was something like a gigantic camping trip. The kids must have loved it. There were religious rituals that happened during the week, but each night everyone slept in makeshift shelters or tabernacles or booths made out of sticks and thatch. It was a large-scale, week-long reenactment of Israel's 40 years in the wilderness. So when God told people to remember, he gave them ways to do that were very embodied. So there is a good reason to believe that chapter 8 takes place in the same temple courts during the same festival as chapter 7. But there is a problem text in between, going from chapter 7, verse 53 through chapter 8, verse 11. Why do modern versions bracket that text, or some of them footnote it, and some of them exclude it altogether from the Bible? Well, it seems almost certain that John chapter 7, verse 53 through chapter 8, 11, the woman caught in the adultery text, very famous text, was not part of John's original gospel. So that doesn't mean that those events, that event that's narrated there, didn't actually happen. There's good reason to believe that it did happen, but it doesn't seem to have been part of John's original gospel. So I'm only saying this in case that's something that's troubled you when you've read through your Bible. We'll talk about this more deeply at Go Deep on Wednesday night, but I'm just going to say that much and then move on. So chapter 7, chapter 8, same place, same time, Feast of the Tabernacles. You can skip from John 7, verse 39 over to chapter 8, verse 12, and you're in the same event, same narration story. So I'm going to read verses 7 through chapter 7, 37 through 39, and we're going to skip over the story of the woman caught in adultery, which is absent from every older manuscript of the Gospel of John. It doesn't show up in any manuscript until the 5th century. So we're going to skip over that, and then we'll pick back up in chapter 8, verse 12. On the last and greatest day of the feast, 737, Jesus stood and said in a loud voice, "If anyone is thirsty, let him come to me and drink. Whoever believes in me, as the scriptures have said, streams of living water will flow from within him." By this he meant the Spirit, whom those who had believed in him were later to receive. Up to that time, the Spirit had not been given, since Jesus had not yet been glorified. Now, chapter 8, verse 12. And all the oldest manuscripts, we go from chapter 7, verse 39, directly to chapter 8, verse 12. When Jesus spoke again to the people, he said, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." So if we're going to understand what Jesus says here, why he says it, and what he means by it, we need to know more about the Feast of Tabernacles, which was the backdrop for his words. The foundational text for tabernacles is in Leviticus chapter 23. There, God tells the nation when to celebrate the feast, where to celebrate it, how to celebrate it, and why to celebrate it. Why? He said, "You shall dwell in booths for 7 days, that your generations may know that I made the people of Israel dwell in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God." The Feast of Tabernacles included important ceremonies. One of them took place right at the beginning of the feast, when priests would light a 75-foot tall candelabra in the court of the women, within the temple complex, in the court of the women, that flooded the temple area and outside the temple area with light. In the other ceremony, the officiating priest would take pitchers of water from the pool of Siloam, and he would pour them into the basin of the altar. So people, ordinary people like us, they weren't allowed into the temple of the priest where this happened, but they could stand outside that area and watch what was happening. Both the light and the water ceremonies were symbolic. The torch-bearing candelabra, 75 feet tall, can you imagine, was intended to remind worshipers of the pillar of fire that led Israel through the wilderness during her pilgrimage to the Promised Land. That light kept them on course. It prevented them from going astray. It shielded them from danger. The water ceremony didn't take place until the final day of the festival. The priest would pour pitchers of water from Siloam into the altar basin, reminding worshipers that during Israel's pilgrimage, they were once dying of thirst, but God saved them by making water spring up from a rock. It was on that day that Jesus said, "If anyone is thirsty on the last day of the feast, let him come to me and drink." At some point during the 7 days of the festival, the giant candelabra, which represented the pillar of fire, were extinguished. Scholars debate which day that was, But everyone agrees that on the final day of the festival, the great lights weren't burning any longer. So Israel was supposed to have come out of the wilderness wanderings into the promised land, and the light is gone now. It was on that day, in the absence of the light, that Jesus said, I am, and it's that emphatic deity-styled I am that we've looked at before. I am the light of the world. So the candelabra is extinguished. He says, I am the light of the world. Now, in case you're wondering, that does seem a little over the top, doesn't it? I am the light of the world. How would you feel if I stood up and said that about myself? You'd all be gone. Jesus said it about himself. And that was only one of the many claims that Jesus made that seemed to be over the top. In this chapter alone, we have that, verse 12, I'm the light of the world. Verse 14, I stand with the Father who sent me. And he's speaking, of course, of God as my Father. Verse 23, and Jews, by the way, did not do that. Verse 23, you, he says to the people listening to him, you are from below, I am from above. You are of this world, I am not of this world. Verse 24, if you do not believe that I am, that's that emphatic I am again, you will indeed die in your sins. Verse 42, I came from God and now am here. I have not come on my own, but he sent me. Verse 51, if anyone keeps my word, he will never see death. Verse 54, my Father, whom you claim as your God, is the one who glorifies me. Verse 56, your father Abraham, remember Abraham lived and died 2 millennia earlier. Your father Abraham rejoiced at the thought of seeing my day. He saw it and was glad. And then verse 58, and we'll look at this one in depth in the last message of this series. Before Abraham was born, but literally, before Abraham was, I am. That's just in this chapter alone. Now, we're not going to explore all those claims, only the ones that use the emphatic I am. That's what we're doing in this series. In this case, I am the light of the world. Keep the setting in mind, though. Festival goers were remembering the pillar of fire that guided Israel through the wilderness. And Jesus says, not I am the light of Israel, but I am the light of the world. That claim's also rooted in the Old Testament. Through the prophet Isaiah, God said of the Messiah, it's too small a thing for you to be my servant, to restore the tribes of Jacob and bring back those of Israel I've kept. I will also make you a light for the Gentiles, that you may bring my salvation to the ends of the earth. Jesus sees himself as the servant from Isaiah 49, but other places in Isaiah, the servant restorer, the light of the Gentiles, the salvation bringer. And look at the promise that he makes attached to this claim. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. The never here is emphatic. But what does it mean? Is Jesus saying, if you follow me, you're never going to experience uncertainty? I've experienced lots of uncertainty in my life, and I still do. The disciples who followed Jesus closely went through uncertainty. Jesus himself went through uncertainty. Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me. Clearly, Jesus does not mean his followers will never experience uncertainty. I think he's saying that people who follow him will always have enough light to see how to proceed. That doesn't mean they're going to understand everything, they'll see everything clearly. It means they have enough light to follow Jesus. I once went on a 3-day prayer retreat. I used to do this every year. One year I go on the 3-day prayer retreat with fellow pastors. And the evening session each evening started just as it was getting dark. And we would be outside around a campfire. And we'd sing and we'd pray and we'd take communion together. On that first night, after everyone else was done, took communion, they all went back into the retreat center, but I didn't. When they went in, I went out. I went out like a quarter mile or so into the woods. So what I was doing was trying to call up owls. I was totally unsuccessful at that. But I'd gone out into the woods. The night was really dark. The moon hadn't risen yet. I was having trouble finding my way through the trees down to this grassy strip that I knew followed the lakeshore. When I finally got out of the trees onto that grassy strip, I looked, and there were thousands, maybe thousands and thousands of fireflies had settled in the grass, and they were all lighted. It was like a landing strip or something. You could just look down the way where the fireflies were. I could stay on the path. Now, if I looked up, I couldn't see a lot around me, but I could see which way to go. And I think in a similar way, the light that Jesus is talking about, the light that is Jesus, enables us to stay on the path. And that's important that you understand, because, and this is what people miss, Jesus is leading us somewhere. The light of the world doesn't shine for people sitting in an easy chair, but for people who are going somewhere, people who are following Jesus. Jesus does not say, I am the light of the world. Whoever professes faith in me will never be in darkness. He does not say whoever attends church, takes membership classes, reads the Bible, gives an offering will not be in darkness. He says whoever follows me will never walk in darkness. Over the years, I've run into people who have felt that God abandoned them. When I needed him, he wasn't there. They seem to think of God as a celestial concierge whose job is to make their life easier as they pursue their own dreams. They somehow missed the follow me part. Jesus led the way, but they stayed put. And later, when they needed to make some momentous decision and they were all worked up and they didn't know what to do, they complained that Jesus wasn't giving them light. But of course he was. He is the light. They just weren't anywhere near him. See, all it takes to live in darkness is to stay where you are after the light has moved on. The Bible repeatedly represents God's people as pilgrims, not settlers. The psalmist was right. Blessed are those whose strength is in you, who have set their hearts on pilgrimage. The author of Hebrews says that we are strangers and aliens here. St. Peter tells us to adopt the mindset and lifestyle of an immigrant with only temporary residency. God has prepared a city for us. That's Hebrews chapter 11. But we aren't there yet. Here we do not, this is Hebrews 13, have an enduring city, but we're looking for the city that is to come. See, all of us were born during the exile. We were born into exile, in enemy territory even, and Jesus is the one who can lead us home. There will be light enough for everyone who follows him, and darkness for those who don't. His promise of light only applies to those who follow. It is null and void for those who won't. And that, I think, is the primary reason people who claim to believe in Jesus experience darkness. They're not following him. They expect him to stop what he's doing, turn back, and give them light in their stationary life. You might as well demand that the sun stops its course through the heavens so you can spend another hour on the beach. Now, this has ramifications. It means, for example, that if we are in the same place spiritually, relationally, intellectually, vocationally, that we were at this time last year, the light is receding from us, and the darkness around us is growing. That happens so slowly that many people don't even notice it. It means that Christians who are always bemoaning the darkness of culture haven't quite got it right. Do you know what? Culture has always been dark. It was dark in Jesus' time, it was dark in Paul's time, St. Augustine's time, St. Thomas Aquinas' time, St. Francis' time, Martin Luther's time. It's always been dark. If the darkness is growing around us, it's because the church has stopped following Jesus and tried to stake out a permanent, comfortable home in society. Instead of complaining about the darkness, we need to be following the light. Only when we follow the light of the world can we be light for the world. Now, what should I do if I realize that I've been sitting still, expecting Jesus to sit with me, or worse, expecting him to wait on me? What if I'm not seeing the promise of light that Jesus made in my life because I'm not fulfilling the condition on which it's based? What should I do? Well, I think start by rethinking your situation. Ask yourself, is the life I'm living worth the price I am paying? People often talk about the price of following Jesus. There's a cost to following Jesus. Well, let me tell you, there's a cost to not following Jesus. You miss out on spiritual transformation. You miss out on joy. You miss out on interaction with God himself, which is the only thing that will ever fulfill you. Instead of hope that restores the soul, you have cravings that eat away at it. So, if after rethinking your situation, you decide you want more, you want to follow Jesus, then tell that to God. That is the single most important thing you can do. We want a plan and a path to follow when we need God. We need engagement with him. Tell him that you want to follow. And then Jesus, even if he's 100 miles ahead of you, will hear and come back for you. He's never failed to do that for anyone who chooses to follow him. He will do so with joy. But don't make the same mistake you made before. The Christian life is not about getting Jesus to do the things for you where you are, but about going with him where he goes. It's important to understand that you are not given light so that you can make right decisions. Isn't that what we do? Oh, I need light to make this decision. You are given light so that you can follow Jesus. So let's say you say, God, I want to follow Jesus. I know I've been stationary in my life. I want to follow. What happens next? He will show you the next step that you need to take. Forget the plan that's laid out for the next 30 years. You're not going to get that. But he will show you what to do next. And what he shows you might be hard to do. Forgiving someone who wronged you. Asking forgiveness of someone you've wronged. Saying yes to a challenging request. Saying no to someone when it's going to disappoint them. Giving money when you think you may need it later. I don't know what your first step will be, but if you pray and follow Jesus, he'll give you a step to take. If you don't take it, you will be stuck in the same place a month from now, a year from now, a lifetime from now. Whatever step God calls you to take may be very difficult for you. He will help you take. You're not on your own. Expect his help. Following Jesus that way can feel awkward. And you're often going to wonder if you're doing it right. That's just normal. You'll get the hang of it. And as you do, your sense of confidence will grow, along with your happiness, and your anxiety will decrease. You'll come to realize that if you get it wrong, God will make it right, as long as you keep following Jesus. That's the thing. Keep following him. He's the light of the world, and that light is on the move. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. So follow him. Make up your mind. Let's follow him together.